we'll let those who come late, we'll let them in. We'll just talk about them just for a little bit.
So Jason, I'm supposed to go first, but since Kimberly's here, okay, great. I'm going to ask to change the order. So Kimberly, great to see you. We're going to go first. So I want to be sure you are here before we start. So great to see you.
Hello.
Wonderful. Let me do a quick introduction and then kind of lay out what we're planning to do, how we're planning to do it today. And then we'll get started with a couple of our presenters for the conference in June. So my name is Jason Veliquit. I am on the ACTO board, and I'm the co-chair of the Education and Research Committee. And we are really excited about the conference that's coming in June, weeks away at this point. And so this forum is intended to just give people a taste of what to expect for the conference in June. And so we have 3 different presentations, and the presenters are going to give just a brief overview of what they're going to present at the conference in June, and then there'll be time for some questions. So our conference theme is leveling up, integrating equity and inclusion with excellence in coach training. And the registration is live, so you can register for the conference. If you're interested in sponsoring the conference, we're looking for a couple more sponsors who want to support the work that ACTO is doing. And so if you're interested in that, please reach out. And one thing that we're really thrilled about this year that we're working on is to have simultaneous translation into Spanish throughout the conference for our Spanish-speaking friends in different parts of the world. And so just one way for us to open the door just a little bit more broadly to folks who prefer to learn in Spanish. And so we're excited about that, working on that, and have some great translators going to help with that. So exciting stuff. Today, each presenter or group of presenters, we have 2 teams of presenters that as a pair. I'm going to give them just a few moments to share their presentation, about 10 minutes. And then at the end of that time, we open up for question and answer or comments. And so you're welcome to pop a question in the chat or just take yourself off mute. It looks like we're a small enough group today where we could do it that way too. And if you have any questions for our presenters, that would be welcome. So shall we get started? And our first group of presenters is Damien Goldvarg and Kimberly Freeman, and their title is Discovering the Power Within, Learning to Use Coaching Competencies for Social Change. And so Damien and Kimberly, welcome. You have the floor for 10 minutes, and I'm going to spotlight you here on Zoom, just so that everybody can see you. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Jason. What I want to say first is that I am very pleased to hear that we're going to be translation in Spanish, because half of my network is in Latin America. So I'm definitely going to let all my colleagues know and see if I can enroll people from different countries to join the conference. So well, that's really great news. So thank you for doing that. And I'm really very glad that Kimberly accepted the invitation to work together here today to do a brief presentation for the conference. We know each other for a couple of years. Kimberly was one of the students, one of the participants of my coaching training at the University of Southern California. And during the class, she's an expert on diversity issues and equity. I asked her to do a session, and everybody fell in love with her and her presentation. And since then, she has been presenting in all of my programs. So we are collaborating in bringing diversity and equity issues in the awareness of all of the students and participants of coaching training. So during the conference, our goal is to share what we do. So what we were thinking is that Kimberly is going to be facilitating part of the presentation, sharing the recording, sharing what she's doing in these sessions to provide some ideas to the participants, but also to hear from other trainers how they are presenting these ideas. And I'm going to ask Kimberly to introduce herself. But what I want to say is that I have been involved with ACTO for many years, originally as part of the being in the global board of the International Coach Federation. So I do believe that going to the conferences and learning in ACTO, like we were talking, Jason, that we met in 2015. I think that my first conference was 2012. So I have been involved with ACTO for almost 10 years. And I have been presenting over the years in different conferences. And I remember that one of the sessions that I attended at the conference really influenced the way that I have been teaching these topics. And at the beginning, when I started training coaches, I didn't have anything on diversity. So for me, being part of ACTO and attending this conference and learning from the colleagues is what influenced me to start including diversity issues as part of the training, making the ethical part more interesting and fun. I think that before they were boring, and then I think that this is one of the things that ACTO is very effective at, is getting all trainers from different programs to learn from each other, to support each other so we can do a better job training coaches. So I just want to bring that in the context. So Kimberly, do you want to share a little bit about you and anything you want to share about the program?
Sure. Well, good morning, everyone. And thank you for having me. Thank you, Damien, for inviting me to co-facilitate with you in this program. I, in my day job, work as a diversity administrator at the University of Southern California. I'm the chief diversity officer in our liberal arts college. And I came to this work in, I would say, a non-traditional way. So I started out actually as an engineer many years ago for a utility company. And in the various jobs I worked in that industry, I started to see the power of diversity as it related to our customer outreach, our community outreach, and obviously our leadership and talent development. And so I really started to focus on diversity in those ways in that industry. And just through a really lucky coincidence, I was able to land a role over at our crosstown rival doing similar diversity work at UCLA. And so that's how I began to professionally work as a diversity expert. And so it's been really a journey for me of learning about what is important for people to bring their total self to whatever setting they're in, whether it's professional or in the community. And I think over the last year, the pandemic has really been a portal, as we have all probably heard that quote, allowing us to move from one world to the next. And so what I've been doing with the training that I've been conducting through the coaching sessions is to really help people understand that, this is a way to frame these issues, a way to ask very powerful questions of your client and of yourself about what world you want to inhabit as we move to our new normal, if you will. And I created my own model to help frame and guide the way that I coach clients around diversity. And Damien will appreciate this because I know that he, like I, is a huge fan of Brene Brown. And when she wrote the book Daring Greatly, she had a quote from Teddy Roosevelt that I really liked about getting into the arena. And I feel like coaching and the whole aspect of trying to understand yourself better as a human is really about getting into the arena and mixing things up. And so I use the acronym ARENA to help people build awareness around implicit bias, to do some reflection on where they are on the spectrum of being anti-racist, or really moving towards a place where you're actively engaging with marginalized and minoritized groups to eradicate systemic oppression and systemic or structural inequalities. And then the E is for the experience of being either an ally, an advocate, or an accomplice. And let's see, the N is active storytelling, really helping people to shape a narrative that is engaging. And allows people to connect in a way they otherwise would not connect. So we use a lot of storytelling, and then the final A is for activation, or really taking all of this and applying it to whatever particular situation you're in. So that's kind of the framework that I use, and I take the participants through whenever I'm presenting from a training standpoint or I'm coaching a client one-on-one.
Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah. Good. Thank you, Kimberly. And this is what we're going to be doing at the conference. We're going to be sharing with all of the participants what we are doing when we are training coaches in issues related to diversity, equity, and a key element that Kimberly is seeing is awareness, building awareness about what are our biases, how we show up in the world, and how to have and navigate some of the conversations that we need to have these days. We have a systemic approach. And interestingly, we're very pleased that when ICF changed and renew the competencies, the new competency, the coaching mindset, has one element of working with systems and culture. And there is where we have the opportunity also to see more space from a systemic perspective to pay attention to everything that's going on in the world and how this is affecting us. So bringing to conversation, asking people how whatever is happening politically, economically, socially. I think that the last year and this year have been pretty challenging in many ways with everything that's going on. So how to have conversations around that, how to be, as Kimberly saying, authentic, how to take some risks, how to do it with respect, and how to feel confident about navigating these challenging conversations. So this is part of the work and part of the what we're going to be doing at the conference. And maybe later people have questions for us. So for now we have 10 minutes. So I think that Jason will want to respect the 10 minutes that we have.
All right, thank you. And yeah, I want to open it up just for a few moments. And what questions do you have for this group of presenters or comments? And you can either pop something in the chat or just take yourself off mute and ask would be fine.
I have a question for Damien and Kimberly. I would love to know what I get to do as a participant around this in the conference. So do I get to learn about ARENA through me, or what are you up to with regard to me?
So we want to make it interactive. So Kimberly?
Yes, definitely it's interactive. I think it's important to understand yourself before you try to help someone else navigate some of these more, nuanced issues in their settings. And so we have personal reflection, we have dyads, we have video that we watch and respond to some questions. So there's a lot of interaction so that you can talk to colleagues.
Got it. Thank you.
We have another, oh, go ahead, Begum.
I have a question. Thank you, Kimberly and Damien. I'm looking forward to your presentation. I'm wondering, so this metaphor of ARENA is really intriguing. And I'm wondering if you're going to talk about how to not necessarily navigate that, but how do we keep present in the sometimes really difficult and dangerous conversations?
Well, that is the tough part, because sometimes we're taking a risk in how we, I guess, interpret what someone is maybe sharing with us, and how we may feel they will interpret our response. I think that's where the active listening comes into play. And as a coach, holding the space to just listen to what is being presented is really critical, especially around these political and social issues that, tend to drive a lot of the media right now and what is going on in society.
Thank you for the question, because that's good for us. Any question that you can ask us are helpful for us to prepare for the conference, like thinking ahead, like for example, storytelling. And briefly, like when Kimberly when she was talking before about the power of storytelling, I used to make comments during my trainings about some of my political ideas, or some comment about Trump, or something about that I believe. And then I realized I shouldn't do that as a trainer, because there were certain people who were not. I gave for granted everybody was a Democrat in the classes and in the sessions. And sometimes you don't know if that's the case. So I had to be more aware myself as a trainer, training coaches, that any comments, political comments, we have to be careful. And that's a good example about how to take some risks, how to be vulnerable, but at the same time, like one day I catch myself doing it, so I apologize. I said, you know, I made a comment, I was very upset about something that Trump has done or said, and I was affected by that. And this is what's in my world. So I made a comment, and then by being aware of and being present, that you're saying, I apologize, and I say, well, maybe somebody here is not a Democrat, even most people are locally in California, and I apologize if I make anybody uncomfortable. So part of the work is also being aware when we are not very sensitive to people who may have a different political, even though these are main human rights, anyways, you know, we have to be present to that.
All right,
It's a learning for all of us. Being vulnerable too. If being vulnerable is part of this, is embracing our humanity and knowing that sooner or later we are going to say or do something that is not as effective. So if we are in that space, just being responsible for that. So in fact, it's being present, being vulnerable, and being accountable. I think that this is what we're going to be talking.
All right, thank you. We have a couple other questions in the chat. There's actually 4, but I might just pick a couple so we can move on to our next presenter, so we have enough time for the others. But Kathy Liska asks, what will we learn that we can use in our coach training programs? And yeah, let's start with that one, and then maybe take one of the other ones, and then we'll move on.
I think what you'll learn is how to frame these questions and frame basically your approach to getting more from your client in terms of how diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging impact their relationships with others and their relationship to self. So the idea is to really use that model of ARENA to get the person to see themselves in a larger context that extends beyond, you know, whatever their functional responsibilities are, if you will, that they are contributing in other ways, and need to understand their context and how that shapes their leadership and relationship skills.
Thank you. Maybe this one more. Kristen Olson just asks, can you say a little bit more about the work you do day to day, the types of groups you work with, just to help understand your context?
Okay, speaking of context, so I work on a college campus. I work primarily with faculty, staff, and students, and I would say within those 3 stakeholder groups, more so with faculty around these issues of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Over the last year, we've had an increased focus on wellness because of working at home during the pandemic. But typically my work involves delivering training. It involves interacting with some compliance issues around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and then building that storytelling, or, you know, that narrative about the things that we are doing as a university to make it a welcoming and inclusive environment for all of our faculty, staff, and students, regardless of background.
And me, briefly, I am an executive coach. I have been doing this for many years. Half of my work is in Spanish in Latin America. I am originally from Argentina, but I live in Los Angeles for 32 years now. And for the last 10 years, I have been training coaches too, and mentor coaches and coaching supervisors. I was in the global board of directors of International Coach Federation for 6 years, and I was the global president for 2013 or 14. And I also wrote several books. Now I am working in 4 books related to coaching in Spanish and in English and coaching supervision. It's going to be the first book on coaching supervision in the Americas, where we bring 20 supervisors talking about their projects in different countries. And I'm very excited to be here. I love coaching. I got everybody in my family to become a coach. So I have both of my parents, my brothers, their wife, my nephew, my closest friends. And 3 of the books that I wrote with my mother. So that's different. You know, like, she's an MCC and she's in Argentina. So,
All right. Wonderful. Well, thank you, Damian and Kimberly. And there are a few other questions in the chat. And if either of you do want to respond to those in the chat, I think maybe we could do it that way, just so we can save space for some of our other presenters. So really looking forward to having you both present at the conference in June. Thank you for giving us a taste of what we can expect here in a few weeks. So really appreciate your presence today. Next up, we have Joyce. And Joyce is going to present, and her title is Coaching the Great Equalizer in the Push for Diversity and Inclusion in the Corporate C-Suites. So Joyce, the floor is yours. Why don't you give us just a brief introduction of who you are and then what you'll be talking about.
Good morning, everyone. To those of you who are on Western time zone and Eastern and part of those of you who are not, good evening. And my name is Joyce Edison, and I own and operate Interpersonal Wellness Services, Inc. This is our 24th year in business. We are a organizational development, training, and coaching company. In 2006, I created a couple of coach training courses and shared with my colleagues in corporate, and they said, when are the other courses? And I'm like, what other courses? They're like, well, we need more of this coaching thing. And I ended up with a full ICF, full coach training certification, approached ICF, and we became an ICF approved coach training program under the Interpersonal Wellness Services Inc. brand, and that's where we still are. And over the decades in my work, I have always looked at the intersection between interpersonal dynamics and relationships and well-being. That's what we do. That's what we're noted for globally. And my work is the signature model of my work is the interpersonal wellness system. We call the WIS method, and I use it as my background, so it's very convenient. And we look at wellness as interdimensional. And that gets us to look at things like, what is the role of leadership? What happens with diverse groups in the workplace? How do we compare the challenges of diversity and inclusion in the workplace, and how do we relate to it from a C-suite? So my clients are federal government, provincial government. We've been working for decades with levels of government, municipalities, large corporations, and they work with us to provide training and development, as well as to provide coaching for individual employees when they are looking to transform their behavior. So I've used coaching as a process of transformation. And if you listen to me talk, you will hear I'm a conflict analyst. That's my training, and that's sort of the lenses from which I look at the world. And I came into coaching when I started noticing that my clients were showing up with ill health due to the challenges and stresses of their workplace. They were showing up. A client had a heart attack in my office. Clients were showing up with elevated high blood pressure and diabetes and strokes and all kinds of things. And I started asking myself, what is the connection between our interpersonal connection, interactions or relationship, and our whole person well-being? And this actually was the birthing of the whole wellness improvement system and the wellness competencies we look for. Our coach training program is called the Wellness Competency Mindset Coach Training Program, and that gives you an idea of how we think, that everything starts in the mind. So one of the program we run is a leadership and well-being program. And the question we ask, if you're a leader and you're creating an atmosphere of well-being in your organization, how does that relate to employees of various backgrounds and diversity, racialized groups, and the marginalized groups? When we look at ourselves in terms of diversity, do we just populate our entry level with diverse employees, or do we work and create a plan and a ladder so these employees can attain the C-suite one day? And you may ask, how does that fall into the concept of wellness? Well, it does, because well-being actually does include environmental wellness and social wellness. So when I put this model together, we look at spiritual wellness, we look at social wellness, then we look at, okay, so what else is there? Then we look at intellectual wellness. And then we look at the emotional and the occupational wellness, environmental wellness. We look at financial wellness, physical wellness, and of course, at the core is interpersonal wellness. And the competency we use here is resilience. And how do we create community for people to grow, for people to bounce back, for people to be able to attain and access more opportunities if there isn't a path created for that? If we do not have the role models and we do not create the opportunities or make room at the table for others, how do we attain a society that's equitable, a society that's inclusive, and one where everyone feels welcome and everyone feels that there is an opportunity to attain based on their capacity, based on their skills, not necessarily based on their gender or diverse background or racialized group? And as we ask those questions, we start looking at what can we do different? And way back when I created my program, one of the courses I created was coaching and diversity. And as we look at what happened in 2020, and we look at the killing of George Floyd and the huge uproar throughout the world, we've never seen such a mass of people come together, regardless of race, color, and gender, and asking for there to be more opportunity for inclusiveness, not just diversity awareness, but actually inclusiveness, which means we're making room at the table, we're making room at the boardroom table. Because when you make decisions about certain groups and there aren't individuals from that group in the decision-making process, you're compelled to leave out elements that would make it more palatable to those groups. And this is what, when we look at coaching, which is the process for development, for training, for retention, study shows us that 70% of retention is acquired when we add coaching to our training, yet we don't see diversity in coaching. We're missing the opportunity. I was shocked when I opened up, we rebranded our coach training school, Coach Velocity School of Coaching, in 2021. And I started looking for coach training instructors from the Black community. It was like trying to find gold. I could not find Black instructors who ICF approved and accredited. And then I realized that I had the only ICF approved coach training school owned by a Black person. That did not make me happy, because we are in 2021. And I asked myself, what is going on in the coaching industry? Why is there such a gap? What have we been missing? What did we not see? And how can we do better? I'm still looking for more of those Black instructors. I found a few here and there. I've had many meetings and I've asked, why did you not get your accreditation? Why did you? Well, I've never seen anybody like me in coaching. I've never had a Black instructor as a coach. It just never seemed like something that I should attain. And yet, coaching, as we know, those of us sitting here know that coaching is fundamentally important in development, bridging, shaping people's mindsets. And yet, there are communities that are not represented in coaching enough to take it back to their community, to make the changes we need to be more inclusive, to really bridge those gaps. And yes, all the way to the C-suite, because I'm serious. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Joyce, for your excitement and energy. I could sense it today, and so I appreciate your presence with that. And so we just have just a few minutes. We'll take about 5 minutes, so we have enough time for our last group of presenters for any comments or questions. A couple of comments that I'll read while you think maybe of 1 or 2 questions that you want to ask Joyce. Begum says, thank you, Joyce, for making the invisible visible. Kristen says, so powerful. Thank you, Joyce. Diane, you want to just take yourself off mute and read that comment? I don't know how to pronounce that person's name.
Yeah, I just wanted to celebrate and make people aware of Dr. Sophia Satterwhite's newly ICF accredited coaching program called She Heals the World. Woohoo!
Great. Awesome.
Good. Bring them on.
Any questions for Joyce or comments?
I hope I didn't scare you guys away.
This group doesn't scare easily. Jody?
Joyce and I have talked before, and Joyce, I want to echo the energy you have and the importance of what you're doing in the way that you are delivering it. So for me, it's not about having a question, it's about the excitement and the curiosity about learning more, hearing more from you at the conference. And I get a sense from some of the comments that other people have that level of excitement too. So definitely didn't scare us off. If anything, for me, it's the opposite. So I'm excited. Thank you.
So I see some question here about some of the changes. Actually, we have a program. We have included diversity in all our courses, of course, but there is a program just for coaches, and we're happy to share some of the pieces. As a conflict analyst, I specialize in dealing with diversity and equity conflicts. I work with post-secondary institutions, government, all levels. So one of the things that happens is conflicts, actually our diversity magnifies when conflict happens. And so the program that we have been working on and we've just released is on the cross-section between diversity, equity, and interpersonal well-being, because that is a connection that seems to be a little bit vague, and my goal is always to make it clearer and make it more, and we're offering CCEs for that course as well. But what I will be sharing is some of the tools we use in that program to enhance awareness, to create some more of the further learning But I've also been invited by some other coach training schools to talk about some of the questions that we ask when we're working with diverse clients from racialized groups. We talk about some of the pieces around people personalizing their comments and their suggestions, but also looking at our role as coaches and how we can actually further perpetuate racism and exclusion, even by some of the questions or some of our own silences. And so I'm very excited about the work I get to do on this planet, and the opportunity to share, and always willing to share and to connect. So please feel free to reach out if you have any further questions.
We do have one question in the chat here, and I think it's a question probably for all of our presenters. And Begum just says, do you address systemic racism in your training, and how?
We do actually have a course on diversity and coaching, and my new book is actually my 6th book. It will be out, and as one of the chapters, we talk about the diversity of coaching and recognize that as coaches, we are coming in with our own frame of reference. And I use the concept of frame of reference because it's something that everybody is aware of. And when something is said or done or coming to our frame of reference, sometimes or is outside, we miss it. And it's very important for us to ask ourselves, what am I not seeing? What am I not hearing? What are some of the questions? And I'll be sharing with you some of the questions and the presentations that I've been doing for other coach training schools on diversity in questions, and building up your bank on your coaching bank on diversity and equity, and some of the nuances to be aware of. And so those pieces will be, I think I have an hour, so I'll be sharing some of that as well.
Great. Thank you, Joyce. Appreciate your presence. Thank you for being here. And we're thrilled that you're going to be joining us in June at the conference. And thank you for being here today. Next up, and last but certainly not least, we have one more group of presenters for this preview forum today. We have Jonelle and Vipka. And I'm going to get a little spotlight here going so we can see them. And I'm also really excited about the conference because we're going to have this wonderful tech team that will help with all this Zoom stuff. So I'm really excited about that. All right, the mic is yours. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Jason. It was just amazing to hear the previous speakers. Thank you so much for that. So my name is Jonelle.
My name is Wiebke.
So we'll just share a short introduction. We might share a little bit more about Ed and I at the end, but we'll share a little short introduction. And then we want to talk about the session we've prepared to you and just the background to that session. And then in the Q&A, we might share more about the company, organization, and the background work if you are interested.
Shall we introduce ourselves quickly?
Yes, take it away.
Okay, my name is Wiebke. I live in Berlin. My background is in classical music. Very rarely do I have this view with the piano in the background, but today for some reason. I'm a trainer for CTI, and I have met Jonelle in 2013 when she was already in the middle of developing the No Name Initiative, and I felt immediately inspired by having a methodology and philosophy that really resonated with my, I think, naturally more inclusive worldview. So that gave me a good framework and channel for my passion. That's me.
And my name is Jonelle. I'm in Cape Town, South Africa, a founder of No Name Initiative. And we'll share a little bit more about that shortly. But the premise of this work really was born from being a South African white woman and needed to play my part in our reconciliation and healing process as a country. Because I was trained in coaching and some other transformative processes, there was this sense of feeling that we need access to this work on a much bigger scale than one-to-one coaching. I mean, one-to-one coaching is fantastic, but often it is for the privileged. And so how do we create access to collective processes that has the same quality of transformation? And so really that's where N&I was born. I'm going to hand over to Vivka.
Yeah, so basically it's a non-profit movement that Janelle has started in 2010 after conducting her research around what South Africa needed in terms of healing, equality and transformation. And it has now gained a more global reach and is of course needed in many other contexts. We want to speak a little bit about the principles. This is basically a group process, but we believe some of the principles are actually nicely applicable and important for coach training. In our session, we cannot introduce all of the principles we work with, but we want to quickly touch upon the most important ones. So one is allowing the whole, meaning we need to hear all the voices, and that also means systemically, energetically including everything that's present, which is often the taboo voices, the unspoken, and also the underlying emotional material that needs to be processed within the particular system we're working with, so that they can actually release energy and move forward into a new paradigm. Then another important principle, and that is the one we will focus on in our session, that also the previous presenters spoke about, is the systemic lens. We are looking at the world through the systemic lens. And we believe we cannot look at the individual like we do in coaching independently from their context if we want to create more equal societies. Janelle, maybe it's your turn to come in here.
So sorry, I was like, okay, where are we now? So contextualizing that all within coaching, the title of our session is Your Client is Swimming in a Sea of Social Constructs. So exactly what Vivka said, we're bringing to coaching and saying, well, social constructs in this case, we just plainly refer here to constructivism, where we say the worlds we live in, we have shared collective meaning making. So whether it's through language, through culture, through community, through relationship, we create often the meanings we assign to anything together. And there's the shared understanding and shared assumptions to understand our reality together, right? So we need that. However, within those social constructs, we also have our biases and our beliefs that often can be very divisive and can perpetuate inequality. So how can we include that in coaching? So if you think about it, of course, it has many implications, and the two implications we want to highlight is one, that if the coach is not aware of this sea of social constructs the client is swimming in and contextualizing the client within that, we would be addressing the client separate from it, and we'll miss the meaning, the shared meaning making that they have assumed as truth. Now, of course, the coach is also swimming in the sea, their own sea, right? So it's two ways. First, the coach needs to really become aware of what are the shared meanings they have internalized. And that's an ongoing process. Of course, it's a lifelong process. And then also being aware of what are the assumed meanings the client and their context might be holding. So to give you an example, let me just first say, so if we don't do that, of course, the coach, as our previous speakers also referred to, could actually be perpetuating some of those biases or beliefs that actually perpetuate further inequality. So an example could be, I mean, there are thousands, but two we thought just to bring into the presentation. So for example, client A is a leader of organization. She's a woman, identifies as woman, and she is getting a lot of feedback that she's too directive, almost like bully behavior, etc. And now, if I were just focusing on my client, forgetting about the sea of social constructs, I might tackle this as a typical leadership style development coaching topic. And we might look at how can she be more inclusive or more accommodating in her leadership style. However, looking at this context she is in, we might learn it's a very traditional male dominant context, culture. And so the assigned meaning to leadership might be from a male perspective. And now there's huge dissonance in the system when there's a woman seen in that role that the system is actually trying to push out. So if we don't have that context, we'll be problematizing or working with the client. But when we look at the context and the social sea of social constructs, we see that the problematizing needs to happen in the greater context. And that often is a huge relief to the client. A second example is I have not coached a client identified as woman or a sexual orientation different from heterosexuality or a person of color that has not had some experience of a sense of imposter syndrome. Same thing, we often look at the client. So how can we build confidence? What are the inner resources we can cultivate and strengthen here? But that again is problematizing the client. If we look a little broader and see, well, actually in their life, maleness had been centralized or whiteness had been centralized, that reframing helps the client to normalize the situation and look at what needs to change outside instead of just looking for how do I adapt. And you can see that the thread, if we don't look there, we will actually be perpetuating that status quo of that system. So that's the first example of an implication.
Then another implication is the concept of choice, which is highlighted in many traditional coach trainings, that we say we have infinite choices that we can make in our lives to create the dream life that we want, or this success is 100% in our control if we just work hard enough and make the right choices and empower the individual enough. And with that same concept, we're not actually looking at the very unequal world and unequal situations our clients actually are in. So choice usually comes from a place of privilege. The more privilege someone has, the more choices they can make in their life. And when we use our traditional coaching skills like championing or calling forth, it can have a disempowering effect on the client, or also most importantly perpetuate the same cycle of what's not working around this individual client.
So in our session, we try and ground this all by simply saying the coach needs to acquire a systemic lens. As the previous speaker said, this is the helpful way to navigate all these different implications. And so the skill we'll be referring to and teaching in this session to help us cultivate a systemic lens, just as a step one, is framing. Now, it might be slightly different than how the previous speakers spoke about it, but in our context, framing is simply a skill to help put frames on the systems, almost like concentric circles, the client finds themselves in, so that we're not just looking at the visual, but we're starting to zoom out and include all those different social contracts that might be playing out, so that both coach and client has those lenses to navigate all these different things. Victor, more to say?
Yeah, I think what's really important for me is also it creates kind of a relief for the client to see themselves in the bigger picture. And then we can still focus on what are now the choices that the client can make. But first we have this moment of normalizing their experience.
So we can pause here and see if there are any questions.
Yeah, we have a few moments for a couple questions, comments.
Yeah, I was just looking at excited how to get this done. Because this is such a huge reality that takes exquisite awareness, love, empathy, humility, continuous work on ourselves and with other. We need simple skills that we can at least start this journey with ourselves and in our collectors and clients. So we are all about how do we start practically with anything.
And this is going to be a long journey in the coaching industry. And the coaching industry has begun that journey, which is also wonderful to see.
We do
Yes.
have a question in the chat. You see that? Okay.
Sorry, yeah, we were just like picking up on would be important to have a systemic lens as an explicit ICF competency. You know what? That's actually what called Vipka and I to talk at this conference, because we absolutely want to help whoever's advocating for that. And as the previous speaker spoke to the new additions, which is really awesome and welcoming, there's more work to be done. So I think this is amazing what you're pointing to.
Thanks, Begum.
I don't know if this is a question or a thought or what it is, but I'll put it out there. I can imagine clients who are also swimming in this water. When you present choices, options, lenses to them, they still have to decide what's going on. Is it an individual thing? Is it a systemic thing that they're dealing with? And I guess it requires something on the coach's part to just present the different things they see and then let the client decide what's going on. So I guess the question or comment is, how do you deal with that when the client has all these, the coach can see all of these different possibilities? How do you deal with that as a coach?
Lovely. So my first thought is that we hold multiple truths. It's not only the individual experience, it's not only the systemic or several systemic truths. And then if we could invite our clients to hold a little bit of a bigger capacity for multiple truths, that would also be a lovely wave
Instead
into
of
our
thinking
work.
it's all my fault and I have to change something and oh my God. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I want to make a comment about what you said, because the word invitation, I think, is a key word, inviting people to do it, because the other question is that the agenda of the client or is our agenda? It's like bringing awareness of all of these issues we are talking today. Is it a responsibility of the coach, or if the client is not seeing or is not bringing it to conversation, it's our responsibility to bring it. And you may have different positions about that, because we are always learning that the client is the one who's bringing the agenda. But I do believe that we as coaches, we have a social responsibility. I do believe that we are social catalysts, and I do believe that we need to bring this issue to the table. And then invite, as you say, the client to choose if they want to go in that direction or not. But I do believe this, and this is personal. As you say, there are different ways to look at it. But I do believe that we do have a responsibility to ask questions about
Sure.
that and let the client choose. But I do believe that will be very interesting to discuss at the conference.
I think too, we need to recognize that sometimes what we're most fearful of is what controls us. And I think many times as coaches, we are seeing something and coaches will say, well, how do I talk about discrimination? How do I talk about racism? It's not that we know, we can just inquire, right? Just asking, how does that feel in the context of racism or inequality, or the first time I coached a client on micro inequities, he was an executive in his organization. He had already gone through the struggles with his peers, and he said, Joyce, I'm facing micro inequities, and this is what's happening in my workplace, and I think I'm having a depression just dealing with that, because it has such a significant impact on people's self-esteem and their self-worth and the ability to contribute. And these are not issues that we can just glance over and let be. We need to give them the floor and the opportunity to say, tell me how you're reconciling this and what you want to do about this, and how can I partner with you? Because we don't have the answer. They know what ultimately they want to have done, but we just need to make room for that to happen.
Thanks, Joyce. Maybe a time for one more comment or question before we wrap up for today.
I want to make a brief process comment for all of the presenters we had a chance to meet today. Is that if we have the chance to attend other presenters, it's nice for the participants to hear putting things together for them. So when you're at the conference, like you have done before today in your session, talking about what somebody else said before, if we can use what other speakers present, I think that is a good benefit for the participants to hear how the different sessions are related to each other.
Nice. Thank you. All right. Well, Janelle and Deepka, thank you for being here and giving us a sample of what is to come. And thank you all for being here today. And I feel it. I feel a sense of momentum, of energy in a direction. And this is the type of conversation that we're fostering and what ACTO wants to foster. So just more of this at the conference. And I think this is where ACTO has positioned itself to kind of lead some change in some real important areas in coach training. And so the conference is just another iteration of having conversations that really matter and that kind of open us up once again for what is possible with coach training and coaching in the world. And so I'm even more excited about the conference after today with hearing those 3 presentations. And we have much more than that coming. And so sign up for the conference, tell your friends, tell your dad, tell your mom, tell your relatives, your neighbor, and have them sign up. And we're looking forward to it. There's more information on the website about the other presenters, and the schedule will be released soon for the conference. And so we do hope that you can join us for that in June. And we really look forward to being with you all virtually this year once again. And before we say goodbye, we do have one more English-speaking forum at the end of May. And Rick Huntley is going to present on power, leadership, and change, an equity and inclusive framework at the end of May. And so we'll have one more forum before the conference, and then we'll have the conference in June. So it is really a pleasure to be with you all today. And I hope you take good care of yourselves, and we'll see you soon. Goodbye for now.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Jason.
Yep.
Thank you, Jason.
Jason, I
Got
have a
it.
question for you briefly about the Spanish speaking